Hello, 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 and welcome back to the channel, or welcome if you are new here. So today's facts turned out to have twists, turns, and connections that I didn't see coming. The end is also the start, so without further ado, let's get started. Number 532. Both KitKat and Rolo are produced globally by Nestle, except in the US where it's made by their competitor, Hershey's. This is true. In the United States, KitKat and Rolo are made by the Hershey Company, which has held licensing and manufacturing rights since 1988 and 1969, respectively. And speaking of Hershey's, number 856, Harry Burnett Reese, the founder of Reese's Chocolate, was a former shipping foreman and dairy farmer for Milton S. Hershey, the founder of Hershey's Chocolate. This is also true. It all started in 1916. Remember that year? Harry Reese answered an ad in the York Daily Record, placed there by Milton Hershey, seeking people to manage and operate his numerous dairy farms located in the Hershey, Pennsylvania area. Now, Reese was no stranger to farm life. He was born on an agricultural and dairy farm not very far away in York County, Pennsylvania. He had had previous dairy farm experience, and he was great for this operation. So Reese was hired on to work at the experimental dairy farm, a farm which was trying to find new approaches to increase the efficiency and production of milk, and also keeping in mind, the quality of care for the animals. However, in 1919, Hershey was forced to close the farm due to operating costs. After losing his gig at the farm, Reese formed the R&R Candy Company, where he manufactured chocolate-covered almonds, raisins, and sold them at local stores. But within the year, the company had folded. Now, at this time, Harry was really feeling the pressure. He and his wife Blanche had already welcomed 10 children and had another one on the way. And the crazy thing is, this wasn't even their completed family. They would end up having 16 children. You know what they called them? Reese's Pieces. Reese was a hustler, and he had to be. He had a lot of mouths he had to feed. He had a job at a paper mill, a second job as a butcher, and a third job canning vegetables. A couple of years later, he and his family moved back to Hershey, where he was able to snag a job with the Hershey Company in the shipping department, where he was soon promoted to foreman. Always a hustler, Reese would make all kinds of candy in his basement. Hard candies, chocolate-covered nuts, mints, caramels. Reese used the chocolate manufactured by the Hershey Company for all of his confections. By 1923, he had incorporated the H.B. Reese Candy Company, selling boxes of the chocolate by the pound in local department stores. Okay, could you imagine this scenario today? Someone would get cease and desist papers so fast, like sued into oblivion.
Cease and desist, bitch!
Anyway, let's get to what you're here for. The Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. In 1928, one of his customers, unable to obtain chocolate-covered peanut butter from another confectioner, went to Reese, and Reese was like, yeah, all right, let's do this thing. Over time, he developed an automated manufacturing process, and the candy became part of his chocolate line. Now, they would roast their own peanuts for the peanut butter cups, and one time, a batch was over-roasted. They used them anyway, just to kind of see what would happen, and it ended up being a happy accident. It seemed to bring out the flavor that gives the cups their unmistakable flavor. People went wild for these cups. Selling for just 1 cent, Reese was able to pay off the mortgage on his house and the factory by 1935. That's a lot of peanut butter cups. At 76, Reese died of a heart attack. The business was left to his sons because this was 1956 when women couldn't own anything. And in 1963, the sons merged the H.B. Reese Candy Company with the Hershey Company in a tax-free stock-for-stock merger. In 2024, the Reese shares represent 16 million Hershey shares, which are valued at over $4.4 billion, paying annual cash dividends of $87.6 million. So, I knew that the Hershey Company was headquartered in Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I had always wondered, did the founder come from some wealthy family for which the town was named, or did the founder move there because it was named Hershey? And it turns out it's a little bit of both. Milton Hershey was born into a Mennonite community in Pennsylvania. His family wasn't super religious, but he lived by the golden rule. Remember that. Having only completed school through the 4th grade at the age of 14, Milton got his first job as an apprentice at a small German newspaper in Gap, Pennsylvania. He hated the job, though, and provoked his firing by dropping his straw hat into the printing press one day. The following year, his mother obtained another apprenticeship with candy and ice cream maker Joy Royer in Lancaster. It was through Mr. Royer that Milton gained his first knowledge of the candy-making business. After 4 years of this apprenticeship, he moved to Philadelphia, and with money from his uncle, he began a candy business. He worked all night making the candy while the women sold it during the day. The candy, called French Secrets, because it had a message inside, was sold for a penny each. And a penny could really get you, basically everything back then, couldn't it? 7 years later, after his business had failed because of the high price of sugar, he declared bankruptcy and began a series of moves that took him to locations such as Denver, where he got a little more training in making caramel, New Orleans, Chicago, and New York. Each stop, he would begin a candy business, and it would fail. Finally, in 1886, 1887, penniless, he moved back to Lancaster. His aunt gave him money for rent for an apartment, and he began trial and error recipes for making caramel candy. His trials led to a candy he called Crystal A, caramels which he would make during the day and in the evening would load onto a pushcart and sell them on the streets of Lancaster. He managed to get an order from an English candy importer for 500 pounds sterling silver worth, which is $657.64 in USD today, not adjusted for inflation. This order allowed him to secure a loan from the Lancaster County National Bank, which helped finance the project, and he was in business. He called his new company the Lancaster Caramel Company, located in the 300 block of Church Street in the city of Lancaster. The site continued to grow, and eventually he had 1,400 employees. A couple years after this, he visited the World's Fair in Chicago, which, if you didn't know, was a huge deal. It ran over the course of 5 months and had over 27 million visitors from all over the world. Milton became fascinated with the art of chocolate making and bought German-made machinery and had it shipped to Lancaster. In yet another round of trial and error testing, he came up with the formula for his chocolate, which consisted of milk, chocolate, and cocoa beans. In 1894, he founded Hershey Chocolate Company as a subsidiary of Lancaster Caramel Company and started producing baking chocolate, cocoa, and chocolate coatings for his caramels. About 9 months later, the Hershey bar was born. As a booming businessman, Milton traveled a lot, and as he was traveling through southern New York, he made a stop in Jamestown and popped into 80 Works Confectionery, a local hangout for a young woman named Catherine Sweeney. The two hit it off, and a friendship bloomed. Jamestown would become a regular stop for Hershey until Sweeney moved to New York City, and it was then that he proposed, and she accepted. Not long after, Milton realized his future was going to be in the production of chocolate, and in 1900 he sold the Lancaster Caramel Company for $1 million to a competitor. A couple of years after that, he quietly began buying more land around the property he owned in Derry Township, including the farm where he was born, with the intent of moving his company to the area. In a year after that, he started construction on 6 acres of farmland. Some people thought he was a little crazy to build in such a remote location, but he had a master plan here. He had fresh milk from his own dairy farms. It was close to the turnpike for receiving shipments of sugar and cocoa beans, which could easily be delivered from the ports of New York and Philadelphia. And he had plans to build a town around his venture to supply him with the necessary employees needed to work at the plant. The following year, he began construction on the homes for the workers near the plant. All of the houses he made had indoor plumbing and electricity, which was uncommon at the time. Soon after this, he put in a trolley system, bank, post office, schools, churches, and even a zoo. In 1905, the Hershey Chocolate Company was in full production mode, and Milton, always wanting to foster community, asked for suggestions from locals with the offer of $100 for the winning name for his new town. Hershey Cocoa was the winner. They decided to just go with Hershey. In 1907, Milton made one of his biggest introductions to the world with the conical candy he named the Kiss. At first, they were individually wrapped by hand in silver foil until 1921, when the machine wrapping started and the familiar plume was added to the top, which allows us to address fact number 372. While the technical name for this little slip of paper is plume, the common nickname, especially for trivia purposes, is niggly wiggly. In 1909, Milton and Catherine signed the deed of trust for the founding of the Hershey Industrial School for orphan boys to help train them in several trades. And they were adamant that their creation be both a home and a school for the students, and that they would live in a nurturing environment. Milton credited the vision for the school to be Kitty's idea and commented in a 1923 New York Times article, quote, "My wife and I decided that we ought to do this. It was hers and mine." Now, throughout this whole time, since a couple of years into their marriage, Kitty had started having bouts of illness, which would plague her the rest of her life. Milton doted on his wife, and he sought to ease her discomfort. He brought her hand-picked flowers every day. She loved flowers. She cultivated beautiful gardens and loved to spend time in them. He took her to healing springs in Arkansas, Colorado, New England, and Europe. They traveled for months at a time and spent a great deal of time along the coast of France, where Kitty basked in the sunshine and sea breeze. It was also this illness that would keep them both from meeting an icy end. You see, in 1912, they bought 2 tickets to travel on the ill-fated Titanic. Shortly before they were to set sail, Kitty's illness seemed to flare up and they had to cancel their reservations. In fact, the Hershey Museum has a copy of the check Milton wrote to the White Star Line for a first-class stateroom on the Titanic. Unfortunately, Kitty's health would continue to decline. From the Milton Hershey School, quote, "Both Milton and Kitty put on brave fronts, but her illness cast a shadow on their lives. When Milton observed Kitty struggling to use a knife and fork at dinner for the first time, tears were seen rolling down his cheeks. Kitty's spirit was not dampened by her illness, and she bravely lived life to the fullest. Perhaps the greatest illustration of her love for Milton throughout her life was seen at the end. In 1950, while gravely ill in Philadelphia, Milton arrived at her side and asked if there was anything he could do for her. She requested a glass of champagne, and he went out to fulfill her wish. When he had returned, Kitty had already passed. Without his wife by his side, Milton Hershey devoted his life and the bulk of his fortune to the Hershey Industrial School. In 1918, he established the Milton Hershey School Trust and made the school heir to the $60 million stock of the company. In a 1924 article in McClure's magazine, he explained, quote, "Now I am more interested than ever in maintaining and improving the morale and efficiency of all of my companies. I want to devote the rest of my life to that end for the school." After her death, Hershey moved Kitty's rose gardens to the Hershey Gardens, and in his later years, he had his nurse and chauffeur drive him to the gardens to spend time with her roses. Milton never remarried and kept a picture of Kitty with him wherever he went. In 1945, 88-year-old Milton celebrated his birthday in the same room of the farmhouse where he had been born and where he died the following month. He died having a personal wealth of only $20,000, having given the rest away, mostly to the school that bore his name. Today, the school they founded together is known as the Milton Hershey School and serves about 2,000 students a year. While it initially was only open to white male orphans, today the only restrictions are low-income individuals aged 4 to 15 without intellectual or behavioral problems. The school, including room and board, is free to students and is funded by the trust containing most of the Hershey fortune, and is valued to be $15 billion USD. Now, this school has a whole other rabbit hole, which must be for a different video, but he and Kitty started the school with the greatest of intentions, so we'll leave it there for now. That's the real story of Reese's and a brief history of Hershey. Honestly, I thought fact-checking this was going to be super quick and easy, but it was so much more than that. I know the world was different then, and that these two white men had far more advantages and opportunities than others that allowed them to succeed, but they also came from very humble beginnings. They failed at things, and they failed several times. But each time, they got back up and tried again. When he first left home to start his business in Philadelphia, Milton's mother, Fanny, told him, "Now that you're going out into the world, my best advice to you is when you tackle a job, stick to it until you have won the battle." Neither of these men achieved their successes alone, nor did they forget it. Hershey was only able to create Crystal A, the caramel that allowed him to secure the loan that led to his giant success, because an aunt paid his rent when he was penniless. Reese spent 3 years working on Hershey's dairy farm, which likely led to his hiring at the factory years later, and that job allowed him to work on what would lead to his success. Please let me know your favorite Hershey candies. I'm partial to a Payday, a Carmelo, a Mint Hershey Kiss, a Peanut Butter Cup when the mood strikes. I also love the seasonal hot cocoa kisses, and also seasonally the peppermint kisses. But those are dangerous though. Kisses are the thing you could end up having like 10, like before you know it, so you gotta be careful with that stuff. But while kind of poking around and learning all of this stuff, I also found some interesting Hershey products that I didn't even know existed. For instance, Shakalicious XL Gummies. I am really quite curious as to how this collaboration came about. Also, I don't know if these are limited edition, if they're still available or what, but there are Harry Potter Butterbeer Kisses, which sound kind of really awesome. Anyway, let me know what you think. Was there anything you didn't know? Things you did know? Things that I got wrong? Please be sure to like the video if you liked it, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. Yeah. Thanks so much for making it to the end, and I'll see you next week. Bye.